Lot going on in the Middle East. The UN voting to give Palestine observer state status, more fighting in Syria, and new protests going on in Egypt. Dr. Thomas Hill is a Mideast expert at Cal, and he joins me once again tonight with some insight. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming by. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, let's start again with that UN vote yesterday. Members overwhelmingly granting Palestine observer state status. Now, there's still no official country or state of Palestine. So what does this move mean? What does that observer state mean?
Something and nothing is the short answer. It has great symbolic value, clearly, for many people. It doesn't change anything at all on the ground. And so those who are saying that this is just symbolic are quite right about that. The main content the main implications of this are down the line. Observer states like the Vatican, for example, can go to the International Criminal Court, for example. They have the standing to send cases to the International Criminal Court, which previously Palestine in its previous status could not do. Now, whether they're going to do that or not is another matter, but the option is now on the table as it is to join and use various other UN institutions. So it just gives the Palestinian leadership a new set of tools to use if they want to use them. Whether they'll do that or not is anyone's guess.
Yeah, as you know, the U.S. and Israel both opposing the move. You mentioned the ordeal with the being able to file war crimes. But aside from that, why would the U.S. and Israel both oppose granting this status?
Well, ever since the beginning of what's called the peace process back in the early 1990s, the credo of Israel and the U.S. And the very few other states who voted with them against this resolution yesterday, a total of 9, has been that the only way to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is direct negotiations between the two sides. Now, they've tried that ever since 1991, 1993, the Oslo Accords, so for going on 15 years, 20 years by now, and they haven't got very far. So at some point, the Palestinian leadership and various others decided that the only alternative was to try a different paradigm, which was to internationalize the question through the United Nations, through other bodies, legal bodies, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and so on. So that's basically what has happened, which is that after 20 years, the Palestinian leadership at least has decided that it has to try something different, and the US and Israel are refusing to accept that this is a valid way to proceed. So the standard line is simply that the parties must go back to the negotiating table, and there is no alternative to this. That's not going to change anytime soon. The dynamics coming out of this vote might move that line a little down the line, but it's far too early to tell.
All right, let's move on now to Egypt. Some new stuff going on there, too. There have been a lot of new protests in Tahrir Square. A lot of people saying that newly elected President Mohamed Morsi trying to grab some more power. They think he's just going to set up another dictatorship. Now, a draft constitution was voted on today, but a lot of groups are very upset about the way that happened. What can you explain about that particular situation?
Well, like many things with Egypt since the overthrow of Hosni Mubarak, the previous president-dictator, it is tremendously complex. One does have to follow it very closely to get it. In a nutshell, though, the new constitution has been unveiled last night. It was approved by the Constitutional Council. It's now going to go to a referendum, and the battle is now going to be about the yes or no on the referendum. The reason why this happened now is quite complex and involves power politics of a quite complicated kind. Now, in the end, what we have is something quite simple, which is a referendum on a constitution, which Egyptians will vote for or against. There are many reservations about the constitutions from, let's say, human rights groups, who see a lot to appreciate in it, but also a lot to be worried about. The analysis from Human Rights Watch, for example, is mixed, let's say. So there are definitely concerns about this, but in some ways the process is at least moving forward. The danger was that the Constitutional Committee would be disbanded by the Supreme Court later this week, and that one would be back to square one. So at least things are moving forwards in some way.
Let me ask you about the human rights issue, because we noticed that in today's protest in particular, there were a lot of women, and they were very upset about their rights and status. Are they some of the groups that are involved in some of the changes going on in the Constitution?
So some of the concerns about the new constitutional draft, which is incredibly long and is still being analysed, are to do with the safeguards for the rights of women, some minorities, religious minorities, and so on. The main problem appears to be that the constitutional provisions are quite vague, basically, that some are contingent on others. There are big phrases like the nature of the Egyptian family. Various other clauses have to be in accordance with the nature of the Egyptian family, whatever that may be. So there is definitely serious vagueness and looseness in the terms, and that opens the door to all kinds of difficulties and abuses down the line. And so this is what human rights groups are being quite exercised about right now. Now, the Constitution is never going to be a kind of word-for-word repetition of international human rights law, but it can be better than this. And by the time the debate is done, hopefully it may be better than this in human rights terms, at least.
Want to check in with Syria a little bit. We've seen some more bombings outside of Damascus, rebels claiming that they're making some headway. Are they any closer to overthrowing the ruling regime, or is the regime still pretty steadily in power?
Well, as a historian, I'm very wary of making predictions about anything but the past, but if there's been any moment in the last 20 months of the Syrian uprising when it feels like a tipping point might have arrived, this is it. Now, if I can just remind us that the internet has been cut off in Syria yesterday and is still cut off, so we have more or less no idea what is now going on there. But in some ways, it can't be worse than what it has been for the last 20 months. And so, while we don't know the details of what's going on there certainly appears to be a battle around Damascus airport, which has shut down. And for a long time, it's been said that when Damascus airport is targeted and various rebel mortar shells have fallen on the runways, flights are cancelled and so on, the end might be near. I'm not going to predict that because we've done this many times in the last 20 months. But certainly it's hard to see where this is going apart from the end for Bashar al-Assad in a matter of months, perhaps, if not less at this point.
All right, very good. Dr. Thomas Hill, thank you so much for coming. There was a lot of ground to cover there, but we wanted to get to at least some of it, and we appreciate your insight tonight.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.